Yes, thank you, Betsy, for that great setup there. I'm going to just share my screen here because although, let's see if this works. There, can you see my screen?
Yep.
All right, I love it when a plan comes together. As Peter said, a lot of people can't look at a sheet of numbers and make sense out of them, and I'm actually one of those people as well. So I need to translate them into pictures, and so I'm going to show you some of those today, which hopefully will tell the story of the financial situation of the church, really this year, next year, and also the last couple of years as well, because I think that's an important part of the story. So let me put this in front of you first of all. So this is my third budget in front of you. I took over after what you're looking at on the screen here. So going all the way back to 2011, we had some, very good years. We had some okay years. We had some, less than good years there. But when I came on board here, we had just had a $6,000 loss in the 17-18 year. Now, if you remember at that time, this was right around the time we were really implementing the new staffing configuration. So we were, growing from sort of, one or two pastors to 2+, and, a few other things moving around here. So that's kind of what was going on in this time. The first budget I put before you, was roughly balanced, and it ended up coming in like this. So this is last year's financial performance. We lost $37,000 last year, spent more than we brought in. Really what this came about as a result of was a shortfall of contributions relative to what the budget had asked for, right? So we actually had lower expenses than we forecast, and we still came in 37 below. So the last 2 years, we've lost $43,000 combined, right? Not a great way to operate a business or a church or nonprofit or anything. You can't be losing money every year. So this year we put before you a budget that was asking for a 7.5% contribution increase that would help kind of fill this gap and bring us back into the black for the full year. And when we started the year out, 4 months into this budget, we were already $24,000 in the red. So by October, we had already lost a huge amount of money. And for us finance people, we were starting to hear alarm bells. And then it doesn't take us long as finance people to get out a ruler and project where this could go if the trend continues. So obviously $72,000 of a loss for a year was really sounding alarm bells for us. And we got in front of people and started trying to, do some things to change that. So we talked to the adult forum, kind of gave them a little bit of the history of what had happened thus far in the year. We launched a couple of different campaigns. You may remember the cue cards, which are a little bit useless at the moment, for electronic giving, and some of the website changes to help people, make giving a little bit easier and things like that, along with signage and things of that nature. So going through October, we had performed relatively poorly. November also came in below budget, but in December, you can see here, we finally got, due to year-end giving, a huge increase in year-end giving from previous years. And that actually took us from being as far in the red as we were to being back in the black. And so what this graph is showing here is the orange line is the budget, and the gray line is how much we brought in. So you can see we were falling well below budget for the first 4 or 5 months of the year. And then in December, we finally went up into the black. And that's what's carried us straight through. So right at that point, we had that inflection, huge amount of December giving that brought us into the black for the year. And then we're not finished yet though, because as we get into June here, we still have to bring in about $30,000 this month. Now, I know things are a little bit slow, and Karin, you can maybe speak to this a little bit, but when I looked in at Simple Church last night, that is, we're falling a little bit below those projections as we are year to date here. So we do want to make sure that people don't, think that the job's done here. We still have, 10 more days in June, and I urge you to, continue to keep your giving up to get us to our budget amounts for this year. And I think there's a very good possibility, with history as our guide, that we will get to the contribution levels for the full year that we had initially planned for. So with that, if we do get to those levels based on history as our guide, I'm projecting right now that actually this year we are going to be almost $50,000 in the black, and that is enough to wipe away the last 2 years of losses and bring us back to, over my tenure, a pretty decent position to go out on, because of course treasurers are limited to 3 years. So I'm sorry, this will be my last budget with you. So I think we're in a very good position. Now, we talked about contributions being really pretty close to on target right now. The reason that we're doing so well is we have had lesser expenses this year than we had originally expected. So we had a few different staffing changes and things like that. Being out of the church reduces some of our expenses. So we have done relatively well due to some of the circumstances of this year. So next year we'll need to continue to keep an eye on this as well. I wanted to show you before we go into the coming budget here. A lot of people have questions about how's the church doing during this pandemic period, right? You hear and see in the news about a lot of churches struggling. They're taking government kind of bailout loans and things of that nature. Some churches are failing or getting close to failing. There's a lot of stuff in the media about that. We have not experienced a drop off in giving during this period. In fact, we've seen quite the reverse. So here's the full year, and you can see those first few months of the year where we were, barely or falling short of the income that we had in 2019. So 2019 is the dark blue, the current budget year is the light blue. And you can see in December that huge increase in giving that we got, which is what helped bring us out of the black, or out of the red and into the black for the year. And that's continued through January. February, we were pretty close to last year. I would say the only real impact that you can discern on this from the COVID thing is this all kind of started in March, right around Easter time. And you can see in March, we normally get what I would probably call like the holiday bump there, right, from giving around Easter. That wasn't really present in this year's numbers. And I think it was just as people shifted to worshiping from home and not, coming to church and putting a check or whatever into the plate every week. It took people a little while to kind of get back to that. And we never really saw that bump come back from that we would normally get around the holiday. Despite that, we're still coming in, like I said, very close to the budget for the year. Now, June, you can see we don't have data yet for June. So there was, when I pulled this a few weeks ago, there was only $1,000 in the month. So we've got something to make up there. But as I was showing on the previous slide, we're going for 30,000 to meet our budget. Last year we got 37. So it seems like the kind of thing where with history as our guide, we should be able to get there, but we can't wave the mission accomplished banner just yet. So any questions on the sort of history here before I move into the current budget? And a reminder, you'll have to unmute yourself to speak. Okay. Hearing nothing, I'll move into the proposed budget. So, for the coming year, I would say that the proposed budget's pretty uncontroversial. Given the unique times that we're in here, you realize that there is a risk to the outlook. So far, our income numbers have not been impacted by COVID and things like that. But as the economy stays kind of shut down or stays, hobbled by the pandemic, certainly our members are going to have an impact from that. And that's going to probably affect our numbers eventually. And so we wanted to make sure that we kept our expenses pretty much well in line with what we've seen in recent history. And so consistent with the handout, and this is exactly what you had in your handout, just blown up for you and in color. And I'm going to start on the expense side here. So if you go to the bottom and look at that total expense line highlighted in gray, you can see that our expenses this year are going to be worse. So higher expenses by only $1,400. It's about 0.3% of an increase in expenses. And so very modest increase. I would consider that pretty much keeping the budget flat for the current year. Now, to fund that, we're asking for a contribution increase of 3.6%. Many of you may remember last year at the semi-annual meeting and the adult forum, I showed you a 5-year plan of, yes, we're asking for 7.5% last year, but we're not going to continue asking for 7.5% each year going forward. We think we can hold that to 3.5%. So I put 3.5% before you last year. It came in at 3.6. I'm going to call that a win. You can disagree with me if you want, but I think we're doing pretty well compared to that plan. And some of you else may be thinking, well, you're only raising expenses by 0.3%. Why are you asking for 3.6% of a contribution increase? The reason for that is the line right below contributions. oh, I've actually got some stuff here to highlight the boxes I'm talking about. The line right below contributions is other income. And as part of other income is interest income that we have on the church's cash reserves. So we have been in an environment the last couple of years here where we have been able to make, it's sort of growing from 0 interest rates to 1%, 2%. And we actually made about $20,000 this year from interest income. With the COVID pandemic and the economic consequences of that, the Federal Reserve reduced rates to 0 again. It's likely they're going to be at 0 for the next year, at least, probably the next 2 and maybe even 3 years. And so that $20,000 interest income that we had expected or had been enjoying the last year or two essentially goes away now. And so we have to make that up in contributions. And so you can see we're asking for a contribution increase to offset the loss in interest income that we have below there. So all told, a budget that's just slightly balanced down at the bottom there, highlighted in purple at $506. Again, keeping expenses flat, income increasing to offset a loss in interest. That's basically the story of the budget here. With that, I'm trying to keep it that simple, but I'm happy to take any questions and we can delve into anything deeper if you'd like.
Yeah, Chris?
Yeah.
With this, are there raises for staff?
Yes, good question. So the Personnel Committee did approve raises for staff. So that is actually in these numbers as it is. Kind of an interesting thing around that was last year, the budget that we put before you also had an increase for staff. But that was the Personnel Committee decided to hold that back because there was a concern around benefits costs for the year, and we wouldn't get that until mid-year. And so the expectation was we'll hold those raises until mid-year, and then if the benefit increases don't come in, so high that they would, wipe out the amount that we had budgeted for raises, we'll allow those to go through. I'm not entirely sure what happened with that, with COVID and other things going on around that time. And I think maybe the budget situation we had in the fall that we were sort of still trying to figure out, those raises were never actually granted last year. And so the budget here has raises this year again. We're going to put those into effect immediately, but they are really get people just slightly above where they would have been last year if those raises had come through.
Then have other things like little sub-accounts been decreased? Because if we're increasing staff pay, but still coming out, not hardly spending any more money,
yep,
there had to be decreases someplace else.
Yeah, so like I said, last year had raises in that never came into fruition. So that was part of the savings in the current year. So these raises really just bring us back to the same level as we had in the prior year. So that's the main driver why you don't see an increase in the budget due to the staff raises. Additionally, we had some lower benefit costs as well. So as those benefit costs were lower than we expected, those got pushed through as savings, which helped offset some of the raise as well. So it's really all in the personnel line, and I'm on a different screen scrolling through here trying to get to the total for personnel. And so with all benefits and everything included, personnel relative to the prior budget is really about flat.
Mm-hmm.
Chris?
Yes.
I'm wondering if there's, how are we going to pay for the roof? We've got a leaking roof that needs to be repaired. Do we have any plans yet for coming up with the strategy for how we pay for that?
Yeah, so that's not an operating budget expense. Peter, I know there's been that's something that was put forward on the generosity committee, and there's some different ideas around that. I don't know, Peter, if you maybe have the latest on that, if you're still with us.
I am. Let me get my video feed here. So the conversation has been light at the council level. Jim, as you well know, we don't have a whole lot of clarity as an organization around who's driving forward these major building concerns. And so it appears that that's falling to the council. And the council has struggled to get their arms around it, for lack of a better phrase. I have proposed that we have in the near future a meeting of the leadership, which would involve the council and those who are involved with building stuff, to get our arms around this particular project. You rightly point out, James, that the roof isn't going to stop leaking just because we want it to. And all of the related concerns that are attached to that. The good news is, I think a hopeful piece of news for us is that we do have between a variety of different dedicated accounts, we have about $100,000 of cash at the ready that we could more than likely assign to all or a portion of this project. One of the things that we'll also need to be taking a close look at is, will this require us to take on some debt, at least in the short term, in order to complete the project? You can't put up part of a roof, you got to do the whole thing all in one shot. And so whether we take that debt on internally, or we take that, as we did with the parking lot project, for example, or if we take that debt on externally, will be one of the scenarios that we'll need to take a look at. But as you have well articulated in the proposal around the solar array and the total roof project, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars in total cost here. So significant work to be done. And the congregation has struggled to bring together the right collection of minds and spirits up to this point, but we can't ignore that much longer, obviously. And so, my proposal is that we convene a working group around this particular issue and bring it to the forefront. So that's where that sits right now. I wish I had more clarity, but that's where it sits.
Thank you.
Good question. Thank you. Anybody else?
How are we doing on fixing the parking lot, the costs for that? Is that being paid up or not?
Yes, I'm just doing some reconciliation between what people have pledged to give around that versus, what we spent in total. Let's see if I can give this to you. This is where I track this. So this is through May. So we have received parking lot contributions of $90,000 of what people have committed. Last I had updated this was about 127,000, and that's part of the reconciliation. I want to make sure, because I know, for example, my contribution wasn't included in that because I never bothered to fill out that form. Bad on me, but so I'm going to just update these numbers, and I will present those next week at the semi-annual meeting, so you can see where we are relative to that. And then the other thing that we're looking at here is we had originally asked for 175,000 in case we had cost overruns. We didn't have cost overruns, and so the overall goal for this is going to come down pretty substantially, and it'll be much closer to the number of pledges that we've received. So
Thank you.
hopefully that's helpful. And like I said, I'll have better information for you next week if you're attending that.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Question.
Did you unmute yourself?
Yes, I'm unmuted. The other income, the majority of that usually has been the daycare operation. I trust that that's a stable function that we can include in this current year budget.
Yes, it is. And, Peter, I know you've had some discussions with that, so feel free to jump in at any time here, but the daycare has been in operation. They have been paying their rent, and we've had conversations with them and have stayed close with them to make sure that that's still a viable source of income for us. I think we even expressed early in this thing when businesses were shutting down that we would potentially be willing to work with them if they needed help on that, and they expressed that that was not necessary. So
Thank you.
No concerns at this point.
Excellent.
Yeah, that's correct. I don't really have anything to add to that. The daycare has remained very, very consistent in their rent payments to us. We've had a few just administrative challenges, but for the most part, the indications are that they're charging forward.
Anybody else? Well, if there's nothing further, I think this budget will go before you, next week at the semi-annual meeting. The council has passed it as a, I can't remember the term we used, Peter, but in the event that the semi-annual meeting, which is on like the 28th of June, right? So if we don't get a quorum there, we do have the ability to operate into the following year under the proposed budget that the council approved, and then we'll have to try something else if the Zoom semi-annual meeting doesn't garner enough support. But we should be in good shape, and I'll show you something similar to the presentation here, but with a little bit more detail around some of the tithe and giving and different things like that we've seen in the last couple of years. So there'll be a little bit more for you. Hopefully you can attend that, and we certainly need you to show up and pledge your support for the motion there. So appreciate your time today, and Peter, if you've got any closing comments.
Yeah, that was a great plug for next week. Really important that you all hopefully are available to tune into our semi-annual meeting at the same time next Sunday. The congregation is attempting to move forward. The council adopted the budget provisionally until such time that the congregation could officially ratify it. And so we wanted to have a mechanism by which we could feel confident going forward. But truthfully, our goal is to make sure that we achieve a quorum next Sunday and on our Zoom semi-annual meeting. The good news is we can get that ratification by sort of a voice acclamation. We don't have to go to the trouble of trying to facilitate written ballots at this time. And so we tried to keep it as simple as possible. Now, 2 plugs. It's not just about passing that vote, but if you tune into the semi-annual meeting, you'll also get a chance to hear an update from Barry Brer and our Generosity Committee on the work, the ongoing discernment that we have tending to the gift from Rose Diesler. And so that report has been published. It showed up, a copy of it in your mail packet with this budget, but also it's available online. But Barry will fill in a little bit more color for you as a part of the meeting next Sunday. And then also we're giving some time for the newest committee of the church, which is the Affordable Housing Team. And they were formally recognized by the Congregation Council at the last meeting. At its last meeting, and they have been busy working towards deepening our understanding of the landscape that we operate within Roseville, and thinking about how our community of faith can take on the challenges that our community faces around homelessness and affordable housing. And so and what role our church might play in that. And so they have an update to share with the congregation, and we think it's important to include that as a part of our semi-annual meeting. No decisions have been made. No one is being asked to make a decision around this. It's information gathering. It's trying to establish the landscape and help clarify for people what the possibilities might be for us going forward, and then create mechanisms going forward for you to provide feedback and to participate in that conversation. So an encouragement to be a participant in next week's semi-annual meeting at 11 o'clock on Zoom. And again, if you found your way here today, you're figuring out how to click on the right buttons to make it possible. And in your conversations this week with our fellow members, brothers and sisters, encourage them to come and join in. Tell them how easy it was to be a participant in this process. And so with that, how about I close us just with a quick word of prayer. Gracious God, we give you thanks this day that you have provided for us all that we need to be your church in this place and in this time. Continue to guide our efforts, continue to walk with us as we deliberate and we discern your will, and carry us forward boldly into the future, trusting in your spirit, which will continue to help us be a presence of love in the world. We ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you all for your time this day, and grateful for your participation. Chris, especially another word of thanks to you and all of your efforts. If you all would unmute your microphones and join me in clapping for Chris.
Hey.
No, it is not a thankless job. Be the treasurer at
Noted. Yeah,
That's bad. That's bad, Peter.
Thank you all.
thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you, Chris.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.